Hello and welcome to another episode of Soul Nectar Show, that show where we talk about all things essence, where we gather around the campfire and we share our connection to that which is bigger than us, to the great mystery, to those beautiful stories, those mystical moments of connection to something bigger, to something more profound and deeper. And of course, we have a beautiful Scorpio on with us today, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But I'm your host, Carrie Hummingbird. I just love going to the depths. I really love these conversations. The more profound, the better. The more mystical, the better. The more like awe-inspiring, the better. And so I love to have guests on the show to have those kinds of conversations and unfold it for myself and for you. And I'm so glad when you come along with us. And I also want to just say,
Mhm.
like, if you want to take a journey to to that space for yourself, and you want to say, hey, what's my like mystical deepening journey? That's the kind of thing I love to do too. So hit me up, come and have a discovery call, and check out carriehummingbird.com, Kerri, hummingbird.com, and it's right on the front page there. And you can check out the things that are going on in the Carrie Hummingbird world, which is pretty cool. So today's guest, I've made so many new friends, and today I have Juliane Nowe on the show. Welcome, Juliane.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so glad you're here and that we're hearing your voice because, from an early age, Juliane actually lost her voice and struggled to speak up for herself while experiencing multiple health symptoms and all the way through the teenage years. And so this prompted her to find alternative ways of healing, which taught her how to heal physical symptoms and diagnoses on an emotional, spiritual, and frequency level. And so now she offers courses and content and offerings to help guide you back to your inner voice. And this inner voice comes from the self. So this is so part of the conversation I love to have with people. We could have a really exciting conversation today. And we're going to start, Juliane, by just really, we want to hear more about your story. We want to hear more about your story of losing your voice and how you find your way back to the space you're in now where you get to share your gifts in service.
Thanks so much. Also, when you're talking about gathering around the campfire, like my partner's outside just being a campfire right now, so I thought that was really cool.
I like it. It's like that. I love that sense of like, hey, we're all going to hear some cool stories now. Like, so we're just like hunkered up by the fire.
Yes.
We got our little mug of hot chocolate, and we're like, we're like in it.
Yes.
We're present with the moment of like that's is where like the mystical opens up and the great divine.
It's beautiful. Yeah, so I am from Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, Heckman's Island to be specific. um, Island connected by a bridge to get 10 minutes to like a grocery store. So I grew up no satellite, no cable, three channels, no internet, like really just in the sticks in the woods. So everything I like to say was very traditional and very like you only know what you know and you're doing the best with what you know at the time. And my parents are incredible. My sister's amazing. I love my family so much. But growing up in that space that we can call small, in a small town, when I was getting so sick, I was sick pretty much right from the start when I was born, as a baby, as a kid, into my youth, just getting sick over and over. My parents were taking me like outside an hour or two to cities trying to find specialists to see what was wrong. Why was I continuing to get so sick? And doing what they said, like drink your milk and eat your meat and potatoes and take your pills and your pharmaceuticals and doing what they said to do that they felt was right at the time. But my body was continuously saying, that's not what's working because now that's making me sick. And now I'm sick on top of being sick. And it wasn't until I got to the point that I was in high school and I was having like acid reflux. My voice changed really fast. So even the way my voice is now, it is hoarse and like raspy sounding, but this is my normal now voice. Before it was really husky, really raspy, but right before that it wasn't at all. So it changed super fast. And I don't mean puberty. It was like my voice was one way and then it was this different way. And I was singing in a choir, and I had to stop singing in the choir because my voice just couldn't handle it anymore. Just normal things like staying up too late, which is normal as a teenager. I would lose my voice for like 3 days, and I'd be writing on a piece of paper, whispering, and it was really affecting my life because you don't realize how important your voice is, how much you talk or communicate, and almost like how quiet and silent you feel. And like you can't project yourself when you don't have your voice that's strong. So it was getting to the point that I couldn't live daily life, and the specialist was starting to say, like to refer me to another specialist. So I went to that specialist, and they were saying that I had a cyst in my vocal cords, and then I had nodules in my vocal cords, and I had a cyst on my vocal cords. So it just kept getting over and over. And every time I would talk, these cysts and nodules would bang together, which would then cause my voice to go and was swelling up. It looked very angry in there because I would watch it on the screen, the camera. And then I would ask them, so like, what are we going to do? And they would always say surgery. We're going to put you to sleep. We're going to go in. We're going to cut open your vocal cords. We'll take the cysts out. And I'd be like, but then what? Like, is it going to come back? How did they get there? Is there another way? And there was never any answers. And then I would ask like questions that could be scary, like, will this turn into throat cancer someday where there are already cysts? Like, let's turn to something else. And they're like, maybe, yeah, it could. And it was at that point when I was like, my insides were like, I do not want to have surgery because my vocal cords are so thin. I could really end up with no voice or a lot more complications. And I left one of the last appointments. At that time, I would say it was about 15 in high school. I remember getting into the elevator with my mom, and there was a woman in there who I'd never met before. And she looked at my mom and said, "Oh, are you here to see such and such doctor?" My mom's like, "No, my daughter is." And I remember her looking down at me and saying, "If this is to do with your vocal cords, I suggest you heal it now, because if not, this is going to be your whole life." Because she started having vocal cord issues at my age, and she was in her 50s. And I was like, okay. So I just started asking the universe, like, there has to be another way. I don't want to have surgery. There has to be another way. And I started getting people just kind of mentioning alternative healing. And being where I'm from, I had no idea what that was. And my sister wanted to do a science fair project on my vocal cords. So I was like, sure, let's do a science fair project on them. So we told my physics teacher, and we set up a frequency machine. So every day I could test the frequency of my voice. So some days my voice was really strong, some days it wasn't as strong. And I would note like what I ate, what I did different voice exercises, found a speech pathologist, and got my voice to like a healthy state. And that's when I started thinking, frequency, like my voice is a frequency. What is that? What is energy? What is frequency? And then I started looking into frequency healing, and went through high school, got into college, my voice started going again. And being in a city this time, everyone in my class, like there was 50 some of us, they're like, why don't you try Chinese medicine? Why don't you go to yoga? Why don't you go to Reiki? And I'm like, what is all of this stuff? And no, I do not eat granola. I'm not going to yoga. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing any of these things. And they just kept like mentioning it to me. So finally I was like, okay, I'm at my wit's end. Like, I need to heal. I went to my first yoga class, and I always like bringing up this story because I had never been to yoga. She takes me, I go into the studio, and it's a 90-minute Bikram hot yoga packed class. So I'm like, everyone, don't take a new student to a hot yoga class like that for their first time.
That seems like quite
It
a
was
lot, a big challenge.
it was a lot. Like, I'd stayed in the room the whole time. I have never gone to a Bikram hot yoga class since then, only because like it didn't really mesh with my heart and the way I want to do yoga. But I knew that there was something to it, like the breathing. I do love hot yoga. like just connecting to my body, thinking about my body in such a different way, like cueing, oh, move my shoulder like this, move this. I left that class and I remember walking on the street, looking at the trees, being like, I've never looked at the trees like this before. And there was like this huge sense of calm. And then I was so in my body, like I've never been before, that things that would normally like annoy me, I would just be like, whatever. And it was like becoming so protective of this space that I was starting to build this resilience of like saying no, wanting to try more things, tried Reiki, found a Chinese medicine doctor. I got a second job while going to school just to pay for my alternative healing because I was so like dead set on this. But doing all these things together is actually what healed every single symptom I was experiencing. I never had to have surgery. I came off all the pharmaceuticals I was on. I was still using cannabis. I still use cannabis to this day. Just combining different modalities together is what I found was the biggest change for me. And I still find, like, even on my website, or if you just have a conversation with me, that's something I'm really passionate about, is like it's not just one thing. It's like multiple streams that you're choosing to like get on this boat in and take the streams that'll lead you to these different paths of healing, whether it's the energy healer or you're learning about your chakras or you're changing your food. It's multiple things that really create a lifestyle, not something that is just do this for 2 days and you'll be fine. It's like this is for the longevity of your life, and you are going to have to make changes. And like you talked about, going into the depths, you are going to have to go into the depths with this support, though, to get you to the healing that you need, and then finding out why are these symptoms happening within my body. And then I've done my own trainings then, and now I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a Reiki master, I teach other people their Reiki certification, I'm a cannabis coach, and I do readings, I have my own podcast. So again, just different channels that when you combine them together really lead you to your own power.
I love that. Well, what I love so many things that you said. Well, let me start at the first thing that's coming to my mind. The first thing is that
Okay.
you ran an experiment, that you actually ran an experiment to see, and you tested your throat, and you like kept a log of everything you consumed and did and all your activities and everything like that, that you started thinking outside the box. Like, maybe there's something in my environment, or maybe there's something I'm eating, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
this, you actually expanded outside of possibility to go, well, there must be something I'm doing that I think is okay that actually isn't okay for my body. And the only way to figure that out is to do this experiment, right? And so you probably got some insights
Mm-hmm.
from that when you did that experiment, that maybe like having whole milk was not necessarily productive or things like that.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Like all that mucus or just other things, like noticing, even when I hired the speech pathologist, a lot of people think that speech pathologists and therapists are just for people who like can't pronounce R's or TH's, but they actually also help you with your vocal cords. So you're speaking from like your diaphragm and the whole of your body, and not just from here. And that's where I was speaking from, was like this constriction of here, and was like pushing words and air out, whereas instead of using your whole body. So teaching how to do that, and noticing, like, are you clenching your jaw, how does your tongue feel, really relaxing into your body to pronounce words. And that was a big eye opener for me, like, why am I talking from just here? What is this stress thing going on here? And like, what's this hiding? Like, why don't I want to project my voice with my whole body? Just noticing that. And of course, there were times, like being a teenager, that I'm like, well, we're at this concert, but I'm not going to be able to scream the song, but just adapting and mouthing it, or still finding your way to experience the moment, but not risking losing my voice at the time. So lots of things I learned from that experiment for sure.
That's a beautiful thing. And I always encourage people to run experiments because what I found, like you did, was when we run an experiment, we can find out so much more about ourselves. Like we can kind of uncover our assumptions about certain things, and we can disrupt the energy and the patterns of things. And in that disruption process, we can find out so much gold that would really help us expand, like you learning how to use your diaphragm to speak instead of like your throat. So I think we make the assumption, well, I'm in the body, so it just works for me, I just know how it works. But no, you can always refine
Mm-hmm.
it. You can learn how to work it better. It's like when you run, like when I was training to run marathons, I had to learn how to like run correctly. Like it's actually, there's a way to run
Yeah.
that you can run correctly so that you don't injure yourself and so that you can go a long distance. There actually are methods which you don't know until
Great
you explore it.
example.
Yeah.
Because everyone's like, I have shin splints or this hurts. It's like, well, once you learn it correctly, then you're like at your optimal level of running and it's easier on your whole body and you're genuinely enjoying it way more than you were before.
Yeah. So rather than being upset with your body, be like, oh, I need to learn about my body. It needs something from me that I don't understand. I need to refine my understanding of how my body works. I love that. I also love,
Mm-hmm.
you know, your alternative approaches and the idea of like of finding what works for you, because even with food, like not everybody
Mm-hmm.
has the same reaction to different foods. Like one food is good
Mm-hmm.
for one person but bad for somebody else, so it is an individual journey, I believe.
It is. I'm glad you brought that up because it's such a great point. So, me and my partner, we've been together for 4 years. When we first got together, I was kind of experimenting, like being kind of vegetarian, but being from like the meat and potatoes upbringing. My dad's a hunter, so I really ate like deer, bear, duck, like that game kind of meat. So even like a hamburger, stuff like that, like I like it, but I like the actual like nature meat better. And I noticed like once I moved out, I wasn't eating that same meat as much because I wasn't living with my parents anymore. I was noticing a difference. Like, why does my body feel like this in my stomach? And I actually started having digestion issues because I was eating like the hamburger from the store or the chicken from the store, whereas my body wasn't used to the store bought things. So then I started experimenting like with some meat, but being vegetarian. I met my partner and he has no gallbladder, so he doesn't eat red meat. So I was like, okay, I'm going to stop eating red meat for a while. And I then noticed another huge change in my body. We were vegan for a year, noticed another huge change, but also noticed like that couldn't be me forever. Like I do need some real good quality meat in my life, whether it's a few times a week or a few times a month, whatever it is. But that's how you find out. I could keep thinking, well, maybe I'll try being vegan one day, but then I actually did it, and now I know what works and what doesn't work.
I love that because there's so many different perspectives on it. And there's some, like I'm connected with some the founders of the Paleo FX annual conference here in Austin, and that's all about eating like our ancestors ate, and understanding that our bodies are programmed by ancestry to require certain kinds of nutrition through just generations and generations and generations of programming, and that when you want to like you start waking up consciously and start thinking about, oh well, my ancestors ate meat but I don't want to eat meat, you can't just change that in one generation. A lot of times, like you have
Mm-hmm.
to honor the fact that your body's been programmed. But then another thing came to my mind when you were talking about your dad, is that he probably hunted and collected that meat himself, and so he had a relationship with that animal. He had like a
Mm-hmm.
spiritual connection with the animal, and that's a very different thing than than like buying something that's been like a cow that's been tortured in this awful conditions in these meat factories. It's just terrible how they treat the animals. So, and then we're consuming that meat. We're consuming that fear at some level. So it's just understanding like it could be so many things than just
Mm-hmm.
this meat from the store. It could be because that meat from the store, that cow was tortured, and
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't
Yeah, and
honored. Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't like living its life naturally. Like it could be in a cage. It could have been like forced to eat things that maybe isn't natural to the animal. And I was actually saying that this morning. I just took out deer meat today for tomorrow. But yesterday we were with a group of friends down by a waterfall, made a fire, like put some sausages on. I ate one of the sausages and I'm like, see, whenever I eat this, like it does taste good, but now I don't feel as good. But when I still eat that other meat, I don't feel like this. So even now I'm turning 30 back from when I was a teenager, it's still the same. So it is really good to like really just notice how your body is feeling and reflecting on that about the animals and where it's coming from and the process. And it's almost more sacred, whereas we've been born into the world where like the commercials showing us like McDonald's and fast food, and there's nothing sacred to that way of eating. Whereas when you really find your food or make the connections with the person that gets you the food, or you're cooking food together or going to that social gathering, it's such a more like sacred, beautiful, energetic way of enjoying the food than just grabbing and going. You just feel so different after.
Yeah, and it could even just be like the consciousness with which you're consuming your meal. Like if you're sort of
Yes.
like working, at your desk and you're working, 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 and then you're just like eating unconsciously just to like, because I've done that so many years at corporate jobs and things where I had to get a project done and we'll just like won't take a time to just sit, focus, put intention on my food and actually enjoy my food and let it digest and come in, but be like working, focusing, and not even thinking about the food as it's going in, right? So it's how we handle that too.
Yeah, I think that also can apply to like alcohol or even coffee, anything. Like if I'm having a drink and it's just like a relaxed, good setting, I feel so much different than like if you're emotional and then you're drinking or you're busy and you're drinking the coffee. It's like just such a different outcome that your body is adapting and expressing than what it could be in this more conscious, relaxed way.
I love that. And so also there's like the emotional aspects, right? So, there's a lot of
Hmm.
emotional aspects to how our body reacts to us, which I think you experienced that with your own throat and how it was telling you, hey, there's a change that needs to be made. Tell us about that journey of exploring, understanding those levels of awarenesses, because not everybody is familiar with navigating like the emotional or the subconscious space. How did you go about that?
So my first Reiki session ever, um, I went to a friend because I felt safe. I'd gotten to know her, and she had said, like, sometimes it is emotional. You might laugh, you might cry. So I just felt comfortable going to her for my first time. And it depends on like your Reiki instructor. So sometimes like their hands are just hovering over you, but sometimes like if you know them or if you said yes, like they'll put their hands on your head or just on your shoulders or on your foot. And for her, didn't put her hands on me at all. But I remember I could feel where she was even if my eyes were closed. And I'm like, how do I know where she is when she's not actually touching me? And I remember her going like from my head, there was a lot of energy. It went from like anxiety to being relaxed. And I almost remember really like dropping into that relaxation. And then I felt the energy over my throat and I started bawling and bawling and bawling and bawling. I never said anything. She never said anything. She just stayed there. I just kept crying and crying and crying. And I was like, I can't even believe this. Like, we haven't even talked. She hasn't even touched anything. And I'm crying, crying, crying. And I was seeing images at the time, but like didn't really know what that was. Like now I do channeling and readings and I know what these images are. But at the time I was like, what? So she comes over my heart again. I'm crying, I'm crying, I'm crying. Finally, she finishes the session, goes through my body. It's an hour later, and I woke up and I felt like high. Like I had so much energy in my body. I was like, I'm never gonna sleep again. Like I feel so good. Whatever just released. And she was like, is it okay with you if I share like what I saw? And I was like, yeah, sure. And she was telling me that she could see me as a little girl with pigtails, which I always had pigtails as a kid. I loved that. And I was coughing and coughing and coughing and coughing. And I was like, coughing. And she's like, yeah, like you couldn't breathe, you're crying, you like thought you were gonna pass out from all this coughing. And I was like, oh my God, I forgot. When I was in grade two, I had the whooping cough for over a month. And I would cough so hard that I wouldn't be able to breathe. So I would feel like I was gonna pass out or like be scared I was gonna die or something. And my parents had to sleep with me for a month. I missed school for 2 months. I was so sick I couldn't get out of bed. But I hadn't even like thought about that since then. And she's like, that took a huge toll on this whole area of your body. And the fear and that banging of your vocal cords now, years later, is like trying to come through the tissues and the energy. And then she was telling me some other things about like grief that I had experienced, again, had kept it in here. Other times of not speaking my truth because I felt like I needed to fit in school or fit in my family to be accepted or follow these traditions because that was the way, whereas I didn't want to. But I would just suppress like all my words and their creativity. So everything was just staying in there. And I was like, what? Like, how did you see all of this stuff just from this? And that's really when I started thinking, like, okay, you see these things are true for me. How do I get them to move through my body? So that's when I kept doing the energy work. And with the Chinese medicine doctor, finding him, he would talk to me about herbs and certain foods that produce like a lot of water because I needed so much like moisture and water to move energy, but also to have my vocal cords like moving really well and not getting dry. And again, I never had thought about food like that. So really continuing to put myself, like you said, in those experiences, but then actually like listening and then continuing to try that something new is what led me to be able to emotionally go into my body. And it was really scary at first because like even on a process grief, like I kept it there because I didn't want to deal with it. But it's like you got to deal with it or else this is what's going to happen. So almost I always say like these good like forced push situations. So it's like you're pushed off the diving end and you're like, now you got to figure it out because you don't want to lose your voice every day. So here you go. Go over there and figure it out. That's what it felt like to really dig in and learn about chakras and how do I talk about these things. And now, like 2 years ago, I started therapy, which is interesting because that's a whole different way of talking about your emotions. But I really found having that energetic background of feeling my body energetically, having those treatments, being able to express myself with that knowledge has made a ton of difference. Now in therapy, something comes up, she's like, close your eyes. What do you see? What's your inner child saying? And I'm like, she's saying this and that, and it just flows. Whereas before I would have been like, I don't know. Should I go there? So the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And you almost, I don't want to say look forward to it, but now when something's off, I'm like, okay, what is it? What am I feeling? What does this connect with? What is this? No, I'm like, I want to go there and see what's going on.
Yeah, I love that you say that because it's such a beautiful mystery, isn't it? Like it's a discovery. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and it always unlocks something new about yourself that you can either have more compassion for yourself about, or more awareness about, or that you can realize something that you've been thinking that you can totally change that thought now and have a whole different outcome. Like it's just such a gold mine
Mm-hmm.
anytime something like that happens. And it's not pleasant sometimes. Like, experiencing triggers isn't always pleasant, but like I've realized if you can, like if I can just stay with it and stay present with it and be with myself during the trigger and the emotion and whatever's coming up and just hold space for myself, that if the energy will clear, and then it almost is like something really deep that was there for a really long time finally escaped and got out, and I'm not burdened
Mm-hmm.
anymore. It's like gone, you know? Like I don't have that
Yes.
now.
And it's so cool that you're saying that, like with the butterflies in behind you.
I love butterfly. Such a good ally
Because that's
for
what it's like. It's like it came out of the cocoon and now it can fly and be free.
Yeah, and it just leaves, like it's just gone. Like that bit of pain that I stuffed down because I didn't have a space to deal with it at the time, or I didn't know how to
Mhm.
process it, and it just like kind of collected it, which a lot of people do is collect it and then try to process everything from here. I think it's interesting that you went the other way, that you like, because I did the process where I did what they told. Did the psychotherapy for decades, and then all this energy was all trapped inside me, but the psychotherapy in my mind didn't help me get down to that. Then I had to open to that part of the
Mhm.
journey. But you actually did the other side. You like went to the body first and to the
Mhm.
noticing, and then you went to like the mental processing of it. That's so cool.
Mhm. And a lot of people, like my partner's a veterans, we work with a lot of veterans, and a lot of people have the experience like you did. Like there's a symptom, then you go into the therapy, you're doing the mental work, and then you go into the body. So I'm glad you said that because that is usually the path to then being like, what else is out there?
Yeah, but you went the other way. You went into the body first, and then you worked your way
Yes.
back out and was like, okay, now how do I cognitively process this? And for you, I think with your throat, like that was the bigger healing, a big healing. Now, the next phase is like for you to speak, right? To claim your truth and speak through that,
Mhm.
which is so literal. Like
Mhm.
I also love how this path is so literal. It's like you needed to speak up, so your throat is the thing that you're working with. So perfect.
I know. I'm like, it was right there the whole time. Like,
It's so obvious and literal. So we can
yes.
find it. So you said that you channel. What do you channel now? Like what does that look like for you, and when you say you channel?
So I noticed when I started doing teaching yoga, there would be times like, of course, when I was a beginner, you're just trying to figure out how to get through the hour. Like, okay, we're gonna breathe, we're gonna have a warrior pose, okay, arms out, cueing, da, da, da. Like it was very just like getting the poses in, finding the flow of the class. But then once I got comfortable with that, when we'd be sitting there and connecting to the breath, I all of a sudden would get these words that I'm like, should I say that? Like, what is that? And I started teaching my yoga classes with themes. I'm like, okay, today's theme is this because it's just coming. And then I would use that theme within my cueing as I taught class. And the more I did it, the stronger that would become. And even at the end, like we'd be like with our hands in front of our heart. And I'm like saying this stuff that like I've never thought about before, I've never read. Then people were coming up to me and being like, where did that come from? Like, was that an experience you had? Because I feel like that was like you were talking to me. Or I feel like what one person said to me, she was like, I feel like you were here, but you were like somewhere else. And then you came back here and you were like this old wise person. Because at that time I was probably like 21 or something. So I was like, where would you even come up with that? And then I started like thinking, like, what is this that's coming to me? And I had a reading with a person in Halifax at the time. I was at a fair and they were doing readings. So I was like, sure, I'll pay $20. And she was like, I'm getting that like you're channeling. I'm like, what's that? And she's like, something about your yoga classes when you're talking. I'm like, oh yeah. Like I get words and I get images. And they're like, yeah, like that's channeling. Like something is coming through you in your class. And I was like, okay. Then did my Reiki training, and the first couple sessions it would just be Reiki, wake them up. How are you feeling? I felt something here. And then eventually I'd be like, I seen something in my mind's eye. Are you okay if I share it with you? So again, channeling started coming through that. And then I started offering half Reiki, half readings. And now I just call it channeling because I'm comfortable with the word. Whereas before I didn't want people to think channeling was like I was being possessed or something
Right. Well,
and
there's
something
a
was
lot of
taking over
fear.
my body.
Yeah.
There is. And now I'm like totally open with like using the word and I'm okay with it. But at the time I was like, I just wanted to ease into the word. So now I'll pair it with my yoga or if I'm doing a session with someone. And now on my Facebook, I've started writing what looks like a blog, but it's just like a really long post of like wisdom or channeling that has come to me that day. Or if someone has shown me something, I'm like, oh, well, this is what I'm getting from that. Yesterday, I made a post, a friend from high school um, lost an animal that she had spent a lot of time personally devoted to healing this animal, had healed the animal, and then an accident happened after all of this. And she was just like, oh my God, like I just put so much of my heart and soul into this. And she was really upset. And she has a toddler. So the toddler's like, Mom, like, why are you so sad? In her little voice. And she was like, oh, well, someday I'll talk to you about it, honey. Like, I am sad, but like, we're going to have a good day. And the little girl would keep noticing she'd like, kind of go off in that grief or that loss of thought look. And the little girl came over, put her arms around her mom's legs and just kept saying, I'm here. I'm here. And I was like, isn't that a huge lesson for the world? Like she knew my mom said, but I don't have to go somewhere else and it's not scary. I just have to be here with her. So that was my post yesterday, sharing that story and being like, how can we just be there with people's grief? Like, how can we just sit on the floor with them? How can we not be scared for them? How can we not do a disservice for them by trying to get them out of the situation or make it better for them? How do we just like let them go wherever they need to go and we're just there? And then I started getting this image of like a blanket, like you had said, like a blanket being put over you. And it was like the scenarios that the grief, the sorrow is the blanket, and you can resist, you can be kicking and screaming, but you're just going to keep getting tangled in that blanket. So then you're stuck there. Or you can realize, oh, it's just a blanket. I can ease into it. I can wrap myself in it. And then the light comes in and little edges start lifting until you no longer need the blanket. Or you can be like, it's a blanket, it's emotions. This is normal. I'm a human being. Maybe I'll wear the blanket as a cape while I go through this. Maybe I'll like have fun with it. So it was these different scenarios, and that was the channeling for yesterday of like what had been brought to me and then what I had processed in the images that was being shown. So that's kind of how I channel now, is in my posts of working with people one-on-one or in my classes.
I love that. It's such a powerful message for this time. Just 2020 having been such a year of tremendous change. And,
Mm-hmm.
whenever there's change, there's endings of things, there's beginnings, there's also endings. And we don't always deal with the endings as well as we do the beginnings. We really celebrate the beginnings, but it's often hard for us to celebrate the endings. And part of that is the
Mm-hmm.
grief, that grief process. And everything that falls away, if we really enjoyed it, it's like, oh no, I didn't want that to end. I was still enjoying that. And then in order to experience something new, though, we have to let it go. We have to be willing to transition out of that. So we're doing a lot of that right now. So what a positive message
Mm-hmm.
for people to just this is just part of the process. And so honor it, honor it in other people and honor it in yourself. Love that.
Yeah, it's a great way that you tied it to that, because I was just telling you I'm making a scrapbook for my partner for anniversary, and one of the pages I'm actually making like a COVID page. And I really noticed how in this page, yes, there were times that like we had to sell our business, and I cried for 3 weeks about that. Like we had spent months finding this space, months renovating, months getting grants. Like the people were just starting to come, and now it's being sold in September. So there was so much grief around that. But as I was looking at the pictures of our gatherings and the work we had done for veterans and for our community in there, I was like, that was so beautiful for that period of time. And during COVID, we processed the grief of letting that go. And then look at the other things we did. I'm like, we went walking on trails near our house that like we didn't even know existed, and we had lived there for a year. We had like gotten our iPad out and figured out how to do like multiple video FaceTimes and spent 9 hours one night with our family. And we never talk on the phone that long to them. 9 hours, like just really finding ways of like embracing. Like there's a picture of me playing crib. I never knew how to play crib. I always wanted to learn. He taught me. And now we play it like all the time. So like, look at all these good things. Like we really embraced the situation and made so many good memories. There's so many good changes in that time. And yes, we can relate as well with letting go of those big, heavy feelings and that resistance that we didn't want to have. But once you can accept it, you can find that peace on the other side.
What a beautiful encouragement. Thank you so much for all of that story and leaving us with that message. So how do people, if
Mhm.
they want to go deeper with you, how do they get in touch with you? How do people get started with you?
I say the best way is to go to my website. So it's Juliane Nowe, JulianeNowe.com. You can see all my services on there, my blogs, podcasts, booking one-on-one. My link is there. And I also have a monthly membership, which is $28.99. And I have it set up new now. So before it was you would get so many videos a month. But now, as soon as you sign up, you get a login. And I have it set up, I call it the Wellness Netflix. So you know how you scroll through videos to find what you want to watch? Well, mine's set up like that. Like it's rows and you scroll through, it's like 30 to 40 videos in there now. So you can find what you want for that day. It could be a sound healing, it could be a coaching session I've recorded, it could be yoga. And then every month I add to it, just like Netflix adds to their platform. So I'm calling it like the Wellness Netflix.
That's awesome. Beautiful. So I encourage
Mhm.
everybody to go check that out and see what you find out there. Is there anything you want to leave people with as a final message before we wrap the show?
Um, on my Instagram, my handle is Juliane Nowe underscore, but like underneath it, where like you could put your name or whatever, I have a relaxed approach to well-being, and underneath that, I have know thyself. So that's something that I'm really passionate about right now. Before it was like talking about cannabis and educating and talking about the modalities and how to get to healing. Whereas now I find, especially since COVID, the work is more like how do you go inwards and find your own inner power? But how do you also find a relaxed approach to that? Because it can be so deep, it can be so heavy, it can be so scary. So combining that relaxed approach to well-being, you don't have to quit everything, you don't have to redo your life in one day. You don't have to be like anyone else. Finding that knowing within yourself. And the more you know yourself, you can be your authentic self, and the healing just naturally comes from there. So that's what I'd like to leave everyone with, is finding that balance of the relaxing and the knowing.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you for that. Well, I really enjoyed
Thanks.
this conversation, got so much from it. And I hope that everybody out there did as well as you're listening in. And just going to ask you, if you enjoyed this episode, to please give us a review wherever you found it, iTunes or YouTube or Spotify or wherever it was. Leave us a comment. And that's how, you know, the engines know that this is valuable content, and is when you engage. So we would really appreciate your engagement with this content. Share it out, like it, subscribe, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to give kisses on the way out. Would you like to join me and give people kisses?
Yes.
Here they come, people.
Mwah.
We'll see
I
you
love
next time.
that.
I know, it's so fun, isn't it? We'll see you next time on
Yeah.
Soul Nectar Show. Bye for now, everybody.